Okay, welcome to the 15-Minute Patriot podcast. I'm Ross Maher from Rhode Island. I am joined with Dave Wilder from Southeastern Massachusetts and Dave Sod from the free state of Florida. We know there are a lot of websites and cable channels that you collect your news from, but at 15-Minute Patriot, we focus on what the news prompts you to do, most especially if you feel that there's nothing that you can do. But don't despair. Knowledge of an issue is important, but citizenship requires action. So if you'll take just 15 minutes a month, I think you'll be amazed at what you can accomplish or contribute to. With that, we want to hear from you about what action steps you've taken and what the results were. You can share those with us on our Facebook page by searching for the group 15 Minute Patriot, as well as email those to us at 15minutepatriot@gmail.com. So it's the number one, the number 5, 15minutepatriot@gmail.com. And with that, Dave the Wild Man is going to kick us off with our first topic.
Yeah, so I'm not sure I got that moniker, but that's okay. So we want to talk tonight about, there's a lot of stuff coming out about Doge and information, and we've got some pretty remarkable news coming out, and we want to touch on some of that. But we also want to touch on how the government is using that news and how it's being related to us. So the last show we talked about something called the Internet News, which is a government paid for channel of news information that connects to a lot of media out there. I don't know why the federal government feels it needs to influence media so strongly and so with so much dollars. But just as an example, I went on Google and I Googled Social Security 150 Musk. And you can probably imagine what I was looking for. Musk's report saying that there's 150-year-old people in Social Security. So just for grins, I recorded what websites came from that search. Snopes, ABC, CBS, the Associated Press, Time, Wired, PolitiFact, New York Times, and Washington Post. That was in order of what I got. All of them were saying, oh, that's impossible. All of them were negating what Elon Musk's report was, just as an example of how do we get there. And so I want to turn it over to Dave in a minute, but part of the challenge we have as citizens is what is the truth and where do we find it? So Dave, what do you think of that article that we were looking at?
The article from Professor St. Ange?
Yes.
Okay. Well, speaking of information that we get from the government, the Bureau of Labor Statistics recently revised the Biden administration's job numbers. They cut them by 589,000 that was previously reported by the Biden administration on a run-up to the election. And now they're going to be they're going to be reduced even more so to the tune of another 800 jobs that may have been fabricated over this time.
That's 800,000, right?
800,000. Okay.
Yeah.
So 800,000 and 589,000, you're looking at almost 1,300,000 jobs that were reported that the Biden administration had made or encouraged or reported over the last year. Okay. A year. Right. The composition of job growth is also a concern because nearly 70% of the new jobs were in government or government-funded sectors like education and social assistance, what the Wall Street Journal refers to as the welfare industrial complex. Meanwhile, only 45,000 private sector jobs were created, far below the level needed for a healthy economy. Additionally, and lastly, full-time jobs have been replaced with part-time positions in this time period. And in January of this year, 99.2% of new jobs reported went to foreign-born workers, leaving just not even 1%, 0.8% for native-born citizens who actually make up the majority of the U.S. population. But that's the information our government spits out, and the legacy media just carries that information forward. And so many people believe it because it's like when you're in the presence of a lawyer or a doctor, right away you assume that this person is very smart. And you tend to believe and hang on every word that they say as being gospel. And that's what people believe when they listen to CBS, ABC, and these talking heads that are on there. So the question is, where do we go for the truth? Well, well, my truth could be different than your truth, but I've always aspired to taking a look at both sides and coming to my own conclusion. With that, I'll turn it over to you, gentlemen.
So I like to try to go as close to the source as I possibly can. As much as the outlets will let me. If I can find a video, I want to hear the context in which the comments were being made. Sometimes, with reports like this, you can't really get to that the way that you can, with some of the recent comments that our delegation to the Munich Security Council had made. On the back end afterwards, there was definitely some twisting of what was being said. So I always try to go as close to the source as I possibly can.
Yeah. So
Go ahead.
I just thought what St. Ange was reporting was pretty amazing. And I was wondering, gee, if all those protesters that might have gotten paid by a political party or some action group, were they paid for as part-time jobs? Does that go on the report? The labor report? I don't know.
Probably. We don't know, but probably.
The other thing that I pulled, I too listened to the St. Ange piece, and he's got a YouTube channel. I listened to several of his videos, generally very short, 3 to 4 minutes is usually the max. But, what I found interesting is that report was based off of the data from the previous administration. And so what I found unsurprisingly, you could have totally predicted this. So your legacy media outlets and Democrats in general, obviously that's not a blank, across the board, but they're pouncing on the new administration as if it's their fault they did something, or rather they failed to do something, or more so they're creating the lie themselves. So it's just an interesting way of how the media also does its part to manipulate, the situation. Almost like, unfortunately there was that plane crash in Canada over the course of the weekend, and immediately they tried to blame it. Well, first off, it happened in a different country, but they're trying to blame it on quote unquote Trump's FAA and how he's been, gutting the FAA and all these other, misstatements of facts. But I thought it was interesting. They try to blame that on the current administration when it happened in a different country. And I see the same thing happening here, where they're trying to blame the situation on the current administration. It's just like the egg situation, and the killing off of, 1.5 million eggs. It's something that was ordered in the previous administration. So it's interesting to see how you see these things get manipulated.
But that's a good example. So you have somebody putting out this article about, let's talk about the plane crash in Toronto. So yes, one fact, Doge is looking at the FAA, and there have been cuts in the FAA. Plane crash. So somebody comes up with a scenario to make the political opponent look bad, but the FAA has not fired anybody with direct control and safety. The
air traffic
controllers, nobody has been fired, all that stuff. So that's one way to spin. So you send out a news article, you point to it, even though maybe you've sent out that article, you point to it to attack your opponents. So I'm getting maybe overly sensitive to this whole process in American media. And the important thing too, going back to the St. Ange report, the labor reports, those numbers that come out are critically important for policy making. Businesses are making their decisions based on those numbers. The Treasury Department is wondering, do I change the interest rates? Does it go up and down? So a lot of things depend on those reports. And to be fair, it seems like this labor report thing is pretty volatile. So even when Trump was president last time, there was 500,000 jobs adjustment at the end of one of his years. So it's I don't know why any policymaker would hinge decisions on this, because it's so imprecise.
And there's definitely an effect on the economy as well. Just in how, not that it necessarily affected any one of the three of us, but kind of how the economy reacts to that news has secondary and tertiary effects as well. Go ahead, Dave.
I was going to say that one of the things that was pretty evident during, not as much Trump's administration as first one, but definitely evident during the second one, and is that when you heard that a line bandied about so much by everybody, like one of the biggest lines is "No one is above the law." Coming from my background's always been advertising and art, and in advertising, before you come out with a commercial, before you come out with a product, you focus group test it. So this line worked with people, so they handed it out to everybody, and they said, their public relations arm said, this is what you're going to say and repeat it as much as possible. No one is above the law. And that whole focus was that not even a president or a former president or a rich person is above the law. We're going after him. And that is how I think a lot of this, for lack of a better word, BS is shoved down our throats, because it is a catchphrase that some PR person drummed up, and now everybody's running with it. Now we just found out too that Soros bought all of the, or is in the process of buying or trying to buy all of those radio stations across the country, right? If he gets all those radio stations across the country, that's a big megaphone.
Yeah.
That they're going to spread misinformation again.
Right, and one of his target areas are with Spanish-speaking radio stations, mostly because Spanish speakers really shifted towards Trump in this election, and so by him owning those stations, he can really, obviously he'll have several layers of people working for him. It's a big operation. But there's going to be a way to influence that messaging. Just like, go back to what we talked about, or you brought up specifically earlier with, what was her name? Margaret
Brennan.
Margaret Brennan, and the interview with Marco Rubio. So, we don't have a production staff. We do all of our production research. Dave Wilder does a lot of production research to help drive our show here. But think about all the people in pre-production before that show went live. Okay. The conversations that they were having in order to shape that narrative, and not one person had the stones enough to say, this doesn't make sense, or, we need to fact check this a little bit, or maybe we need to change the delivery on it, because there's been nothing but backlash ever since. So my point is, as we look at Soros and these radio stations, there's absolutely opportunity to completely twist and manipulate whatever the message is. Yeah.
To your point, Ross, though, when you said they didn't have the wherewithal to check their facts, I think that they've used this model of the Nazi regime so much that when she came out with that, she knew it was a lie. They all knew it was a lie. But once
100% agree.
Once it's out there, there are people say, "Oh my God, yeah, they had all that free speech, and that's how all of the Jewish people were killed and going on." They just have beaten that horse to the point where it's just nauseating, because there wasn't any free speech in Germany in the Nazi regime.
I think John Kerry put it pretty clearly in PolitiFact. I'm sorry, Real Clear Politics. Yes, sorry. Yeah. He came out and said it was really hard to get consensus because you can find information everywhere. So he was kind of feeling sad that government didn't have the control of media that it used to. So again, we're closing up the show. A lot of interesting facts are coming out. It's kind of refreshing to see some real auditing happening. But that kind of does it for our show. And I'll let Dave close us out.
Well, listen, often we talk about the federal government, but keep your eye on the federal government. Pay attention to what's going on. But that filters down to your state government. Pay attention to what's going on in your local state, state houses, and also in your local towns, because that's where you're going to have the biggest impact as a person. Go to your town meetings, challenge your select people board, challenge your town council, challenge your mayor, stand up, be heard, because don't just pass it off as something, you don't have the time to do. Go there. You can even watch on public TV what's going on in your town. Be active. Have your voice heard. Challenge what they're saying and they're doing. That's it.
Okay. You can contact us at 15minutepatriot@gmail.com. Look us up on Facebook and have a great day. Thank you.